It's game week. Football is back. We're going to get into the top storylines, the biggest things we want to see in week 0 for Kansas against Fresno State, and a couple other positional group previews for the Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks, and it is game week. Thank you for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show, whether it's through our audio side of things or on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of LOJ, we're getting into a game being game week, getting into some of the top storylines coming to the game, getting into the things we want to see from Kansas against Fresno State. We'll get to some of the other positional room previews, which we've been doing. Defensive tackle and tight end will be the two position previews, which you could maybe argue are KU's most trusted position and maybe the biggest question mark position group for KU. So we'll get into all those on today's episode, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. All right. Storylines, biggest things we want to see for Kansas against Fresno State to get us started here. And the first has to be the new stadium, new era, so to speak, in Jalen Daniels' verbiage. But it's the opportunity to start something new. You know, Kansas, as we know, has had some really fun seasons, awesome seasons, but it hasn't been the most productive, the best football program there is. And this feels like a new start. It feels like a new opportunity. It feels like a new era. Can Jalen Daniels sue me? I don't know. That would be bad. I hope he wouldn't. Anyway, you look at this new stadium, it represents an opportunity for KU to start anew. You know, it represents an opportunity of the investment in the program. It represents an opportunity to show the fruits of their labor and what donors and their Lance Leipold and Travis Goff and the football players, I mean, all have a hand in this and in allowing Kansas to get to this point. It's an opportunity to start fresh, man. It's an opportunity to start fresh from last year. I mean, if we don't want to talk big picture, if we don't want to say starting fresh as a program, like just starting fresh from last year, right? Because last year did not go how you intended it to go. And, you know, I think we tried to not make last year as big of a deal. Like, I think anytime you're getting into the season, you're trying to push down the possible bad things, right? And I think last year, we went into the year going, okay, it's not a big deal they're playing in Arrowhead. Like, they stay overnight in Kansas City anyway at a hotel, even when they're playing in Lawrence. What's the big deal? I don't know, man. Being somewhere where you're practicing all the time, having it feel like home, the environment's different. It does matter. It does. And I think it did. And I think it hurt KU earlier on in the season that it was just a little bit more eclectic on the season. I think it's going to help them. I think there is like an inherent boost that comes with it this year. But also, I'm just excited to see the new stadium. It looks awesome. I'm really excited to watch a game in there. And I think Travis Goff nailed it. But we'll have our reports on that. I don't know. We're going to have to spend like a segment, not just breaking down the game, but breaking down the stadium on upcoming episodes as well. I think some of the things I want to see and what I'm going to be looking for, some of the storylines coming into this one. What is the offensive line going to look like for KU? And obviously, this episode is releasing in a point that is probably less than, 12 hours from when the first depth chart for KU football is going to be released. So from that standpoint, like, you're going to have answers on what that is going to look like shortly. But even some of the answers that the depth chart is going to give you aren't going to be full answers. It's just going to be a little bit of a hint, because somebody could be named a starter, but there could be an or next to their name, or somebody could be named a starter, but because it's the first games of the season and some of these competitions are going to carry into the season, especially this week and the Wagner game and the FCS game, I think you're going to look at some of these players who are listed as starters playing similar snap counts to maybe the guy who's backing them up, where the staff's going to give both players an opportunity to try to win out in that competition in a setting of like actual game, right? And so who do we see on the offensive line? You feel good about Bryce Foster, Kobe Baines, and Calvin Clements, 3-year starters. Who's going to win one of those guard spots? Is it going to be Amir Herring? Is it going to be Tavaki Tuiko-Lavatu, the transfer from UCLA? Is it going to be James Livingston? Who's going to win the other tackle spot? Is it going to be Enrique Cruz? Is it going to be Nolan Gorsica? Is it going to be one of the other transfers you brought in, right? That's kind of a younger player. How is it going to look? But maybe more importantly, in fact, yes, more importantly, how is it going to play for KU. That becomes obviously a key because this has been a unit. The offensive line has been a strength for the Jayhawks over the last couple of seasons. So can it continue to be a strength on this year's team? Who is Jalen Daniels going to have his Luke Grimm connection with? Jason Bean, if you look at the stats, like the primary targets when Jason Bean was out there, it was more LJ Arnold. When Jalen Daniels has been in there, and this goes back to even 2021, 2022, Luke Grimm was always his favorite target, and that manifested itself last year when Jalen was fully healthy and started every game for KU. Who's that guy that he trusts going to be this year that gets the majority of the target share? Will it be Cam Pickett? Will it be Emmanuel Henderson? Will it be Levi Wentz? Will it be Bryson Canty coming off injury in fall camp and stuff? Who knows who that's going to be, but that'll be very interesting in kind of an overhauled receiver core for KU. Will the Kansas defensive line, it's a group that I feel good about. We'll get to our defensive tackle room overview here in a second, but I feel good about the defensive line as a whole, D tackle and defensive end. But do I just feel good about it because there's a lot of solid players, which, having a high floor, that is an impactful thing and that is nice to have. But is it just going to be like a solid unit for KU, or is it going to be like a unit that is like one of the better ones in the Big 12? Is it going to be a unit that is a big strength and is a game-wrecking unit for KU where you have that Austin Booker level player? That kind of becomes interesting for me in terms of, how impactful could it be to the defense? And speaking of the defense, how transformed is the linebacker core? We're not going to get to learn everything in this game, but Fresno State has a running back who averaged 6 yards per carry last year. If Kansas is able to hold him down to 3.5, you're going to feel really good about the overhauled linebacking core with Bengali Kamara, Trey Lathan, and Joseph Sipp transferring in addition to the guys who are younger players that KU's been developing behind the scenes. Are the young defensive backs ready? It's a defensive back room where you go through all these players, and they were all like 87, 88, 89 rated 3 stars coming out of high school, which are on the closer end to being 4-star recruits. Kansas has put a lot of talent into that DB room, but you lost a couple studs and you lost 4 starters from the back end. You don't have the experience, but you do have a lot of talent and depth all the way through. How's that going to manifest itself? Are you going to have some early season woes? Are you going to have some season woes this year where those players are learning on the job, but then eventually they're good players, but it doesn't come till 2026 or 2027? Or does the talent weigh out? I mean, I look at Melo Dotson and Kobe Bryant, and those guys were starters when they were underclassmen, and maybe they weren't as good as by the time they were juniors or seniors, but they were still productive players. They were still pretty good players for KU in the early parts. And so that does give me hope that even without as much experience, the talent can weigh itself out at that specific position group. But you want to see it. How does it look? And are they ready to go for KU? And I think in general with the defense, what does the defensive scheme and the play calling look like? I mean, I'm curious to see what the play calling looks like for the KU offense. How different is it to Andy Kotelnicki? How different is it to Jeff Grimes? But we have at least seen the bowl game with Jim Zabrowski, and we do at least know how Lance Leipold likes to do things. We have at least an inkling there. With DK McDonald, we have some hints here and there, but I just remember going into that 2022 season on offense, and all of a sudden they're running speed option, right? It was something that they tried to keep secret, and then you see it for 1 or 2 plays in their FCS game, and then boom, all of a sudden it's like a primary part of their offense. Could that be happening with the defense? Could they be saying we're going to do this and they do that, right? Could they zig when they zag? How aggressive are they going to be with blitzes? How often do they, run different fronts with running a 3-man front versus a 4-man front? How often do they run 2 linebackers? How often do they run the 5th DB as a safety versus a corner? A lot I want to see with DK McDonald and the Kansas scheme defensively overall. Which young players get into the game for Kansas? I mean, obviously there are certain positions like Jalen Todd, Taylor Davis. Those are young players who are going to get into the game because they're probably going to be starters. But what young players get into the game that rotate in that clearly the staff wants to see more from, right? Do we see Austin Alexander? Do we see, Jaleel Hurley, the transfer from Alabama? Do we see one of these young defensive linemen, like a Dak Brinkley, get into the game for meaningful snaps? Do we see any of the young freshman receivers? They got 4 of them. Do we see any of the young freshmen, redshirt freshman running backs come into the game? Going to be very interesting how that all comes together with those positions and some of the young players and, what is their role going to be? Because this isn't an FCS game where it's, hey, we're probably going to be up so much that the young players are going to have to come in. It's like, if you come in this one, a game that's projected to be a 2-touchdown game, kind of means that the staff trusts you at an early age, which would tell you a lot. And then the last one, this is the most important one. Can Kansas beat their Mountain West Conference opponent this year? Unable to do so last year, and they end up a game short of making a bowl game. Take advantage of it this year. Take advantage of the new crowd. Take advantage of the new stadium and go beat Fresno State this Saturday. All right, we're going to continue on with some of our position previews. We'll get to the D tackle room, then we'll get to the tight end room next. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, heck, maybe it's all-day tailgating on Saturday, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. It is so easy to stay hydrated on the go, or if you're on the move, because you don't have to carry around that bottle, right? You just get that packet, you pour it into whatever bottle of water or whatever cup of water you're able to get. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That is dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Don't forget you make Locked on College Football to get ready for week 0, your second listen every day. And so the KU defensive tackle room becomes very interesting this year for the Jayhawks because it might be the strength of at least the defense, but maybe of the entire team. This is a very productive, deep group that KU has, but still there's a question of, is there going to be a star? Is it just a collection of a handful of like solid players, good players, which would still be very helpful, very useful for KU? But can somebody break out and be that, I don't know, James McClinton level defensive tackle for KU that is a game wrecker for other teams? So you look at the possible starters. Obviously, you're going to be going with 2. I think DJ Withers, 6'4", 300-pound redshirt senior. He's somebody who went down to media days for KU. So that shows where he kind of is on the pecking order with a leadership perspective or that Lance Leipold trusts him, right? He had 37 career tackles, 7 TFLs, 3 sacks, 4 of those TFLs, and all 3 of those sacks games last year. And he had a close to an 8% pass rush win rate, which is really good for a defensive tackle, 15 pressures in 2024. So he's one of the favorites to start. I think there's 3 guys you really look at for 2 spots. Tommy Dunn would be the other one, 6'3", 305-pound redshirt senior, 38 career tackles, 8 TFLs, 2 sacks, about a 7% pass rush win rate with 13 pressures in 2024 when he had 4 TFLs and 1.5 sacks. He kind of dealt with an injury through last season. The early part of last year, Tommy Dunn looked like he was breaking out to be KU's best defensive tackle. Some of the injuries held him back to where he was still in that running in that group, but we'll see if he can stay healthy this year and if he does take that full step for a full season. The other guy who, by Pro Football Focus grade actually ended up KU's best defensive tackle is Blake Harold. He'll be a redshirt sophomore now, 6'3", 290, 20 tackles, 3 TFLs, 1 sack last season. He had 9 pressures with a 4.3% pass rush win rate. So Dunn and Withers actually had better pass rush numbers. Harold was actually better against the run than both of those guys, but all of them represent players that I think have all Big 12 possibility, and any 2 of those 3 could start. I think Withers and Dunn probably from seniority have the leg up there, but Harold's going to play a ton of snaps for KU. Now, if KU has 8 good defensive tackles, they'll rotate them all with Jim Pangos. If they have 4, they'll try to play the 4th the majority of the time. I think they really have 5 they feel really good about, and maybe a 6th with a young guy coming together. So if we transfer over to the battle for the 2 deep, you look to Keenan Caldwell, 6'3", 325-pound redshirt senior. He's definitely in this group that I think is going to rotate in and play. 23 career tackles, 1 TFL, half a sack. Not a big pass rush guy, 1.4% pass rush win rate, just 1 pressure, but 325 pounds, he can clog the lane. He can help you in run defense at the very least. And who knows, maybe there is a little more juice this year in his final season in the pass rush, but at the very least useful as a body to help stop the run and get some of those other guys breathers. Gage Keys is kind of the opposite. So that's the beauty of it. It's like if you need a run stopping D tackle, sub in Keenan Caldwell. You need more of the pass rush, you bring in Gage Keys, 6'4", 285-pound redshirt senior, 26 career tackles, 17 pressures, with a 4.1% pass rush win rate for KU in 2023. So, he's somebody who can come in, and he really came on at the end of his time at Kansas, and those numbers got even better before he transferred to Auburn and now boomeranged back to Kansas. Now, one of those young guys who maybe we see on the field this year that extends that depth is Marcus Calvin, 6'2", 300-pound redshirt sophomore. He might if you want to put him in the future to watch category or the battling for the 2 deep, probably classifies for both, but sounds like he's been making positive progress and inroads on the rotation this year. So maybe we see it 6 deep. And I think Gage Keys has kind of been banged up in fall camp. So maybe he takes Gage Keys 5th, top 5 spot in the D tackle room until Keys is fully healthy. And then the other future guy to watch, Josiah Hammond, 6'4", 270 pounds. Obviously, they're going to try to get him closer to that 300-pound mark as they work with him, as they've done so well with some other young players in that defensive line room. Other players on the roster, Jason Strickland and Grady Seifert for KU. Now, the big question and storylines for this unit, again, I feel very good about the floor of this unit. I feel like it's going to be a solid unit for KU. That's, it's just going to be a very helpful unit for Kansas. But the question becomes, is it going to emerge from being a known quantity that gives you solid play with a high floor to one that also has a high ceiling? And I think to do that, it either takes 2 or 3 of those guys becoming at least fringe all Big 12 honorable mention caliber players, or it takes one of those guys becoming that like all Big 12 first team player where you have an all Big 12 first team defensive tackle and then 4 or 5 other guys who are at least solid quality players. Either one of those, I think, raises the ceiling in a real way here. And who would that guy be? Is it Tommy Dunn, who, again, I think was showing flashes of that early last season before kind of playing through some injury stuff? Is it Blake Harreld, who we saw skyrocket up as a redshirt freshman, right? Could he take another big step in his second year of play? DJ Withers, again, went down for media days. That shows the trust that the coaching staff had. Those are the 3 that I'm kind of looking at. Can one of them take that big step forward where they are a game wrecker for KU moving ahead? And so I think the final thought here, you could make the argument this is KU's best position group, but it almost feels like that's from a known quantity perspective. Like if you're talking the biggest ceiling position groups at KU, maybe you'd even take receiver because of the ceiling of guys like Emmanuel Henderson and Cam Pickett. Maybe you take the quarterback room because of the ceiling of some of the young quarterbacks, and the ceiling of Jalen Daniels is still one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Maybe from a ceiling perspective, you would take some of the DB room just because of all the talent you have there, even though it's a little more inexperienced. But from a floor perspective, this is the room that I feel like is at least has one of the highest floors on the team. Again, where does the ceiling come from? But you could make the argument this is KU's most trusted and best position group on the team and the defense. And what does that mean for building a defense? If you feel good about the defensive line, like if you're telling me to pick one position group that's going to be the best on the defense, I would take defensive line. Now, if you're splitting up as we are here, defensive tackle and defensive end, I'd probably take defensive end a little more, but defensive tackle is still such an important position, right? If you can get some pass rush from it, which KU does a little bit with Withers and Dunn specifically, but if you can especially get the run stopping with it, which remember in the first half of last season, KU's run defense was actually like really good. That's going to help you so much as a defense. That's going to help that back end. If you're in 3rd and long a lot more than you are in 3rd and 3, makes the other team a lot more predictable in what they're going to do. And DK McDonald can dial some stuff up or throw an extra DB out there to help the guys on the back end. That's why I think the defense tackle room is so important. They have a good one, and you do have a good one in Kansas. All right, let's get to that tight end room preview next. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to maybe head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. Suddenly you realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. You can get tickets to the KU Fresno State game at the time of recording right now. I'm looking, if we want to sit on the new side of the stadium, right? How about this? This is perfect. Section 115, you got basically a straight shot view of the new video board, the big video board. Row 11 for $80 on Game Time, right? And if you use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, you can take $20 off your first purchase. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Jayhawks, and don't forget to check out some of our recent episodes talking KU football. We talked a little Bill Self update, gave an update on his health, and plenty of other content here on Locked On Jayhawks. On to our tight end room preview for KU football. You go from defensive tackle, where that's one of the higher floor positions for KU, to tight end, which the floor is a little bit lower here. Now, the ceiling could be pretty high based on some young guys performing, but after you lost Keyshawn Burnett late in the game, who was going to play, big snaps for you, after you've lost over the last couple of years a handful of tight ends, this is a position group that is going to be relying a lot on a player in Deshaun Hanukkah, who I think is a talented player and could have a really good season for KU, but also is somebody who hasn't played an organized football game since 2022. So that puts a lot of pressure on him to perform. 6'6", 245-pound redshirt senior, coming off a bad injury as well. Again, I think he has the talent to perform, and it'll be a great story if he does, and I hope he does. But that is a lot of pressure on somebody to do that. That was the beauty of having Keon Burnett, whereas if it takes a little longer to get in the swing of things, you have this guy from Burnett. He ends up bouncing back to Arizona after transferring in for the spring. Now, battle for the two deep, I think it's wide open. Leighton Cure, the former transfer from Emporia State, 6'3", 245 redshirt senior. One thing I think is interesting about Cure, he got a little bit of run last year. He was coming off a season-ending injury from the year before. And so typically guys, the second year off that injury are going to play better. I could see Cure taking a nice little leap forward because of that. Bowden Grown was a late add from Rice after they lost Keon Burnett late. 6'4", 240-pound redshirt senior. He has 60 career catches, so productive player. How's he going to be as a blocker? Not as explosive of a player downfield, but dependable, and that'll certainly be helpful for KU. And the guy kind of making noise right now is Carson Brune. I guess the final parting gift from Andy Kotelnicki before he left to Penn State. Kotelnicki was at least one of the recruiters on Carson Brune. He was obviously the tight end coach at the time. And Brune decided to keep his commitment to KU after Kotelnicki left for Penn State. And he redshirted last year, 6'6", 255-pound redshirt freshman is what he's listed as, which giant dude at tight end. That's always cool to see. But maybe he's the game changer. What if he's one of those young guys that does end up on the two deep, where he does end up the backup or something, or at least the third string? And we know KU likes to play a lot of two lineup sets, sometimes three lineup sets. And one of my big questions for this team is who's going to play that Jared Casey role, right? Because the Jared Casey role is a little different than just the traditional tight end. Sometimes you're going to play tight end. Sometimes you're going to line up at tight end. Other times you're going to be fullback. Other times you're going to be an H-back. Other times you're going to come in motion. Other times you're going to come set. Could that be Carson Brune? Could that be Leighton Cure? Could that be Bowden Grown? I have no idea. I think I would almost look to Cure or Brune as being the two guys, but I find that very interesting with this position room. Now, future to watch, Brune would obviously be one of them. I think, honestly, if you're projecting who's the 2026 starter, Brune would probably be the guy right now. And then can Jaden Ham, local recruit from Eudora, 6'6", 250 redshirt sophomore, can he, have a season where the light bulb goes off for him and he starts to make inroads as a former highly recruited player that KU flipped from Arkansas? You also have Quentin Conley and Conley Hovey on the roster. I think the biggest questions, storylines for this unit coming into the year, again, you have players returning from injury in different regards that are going to have a big impact. Hanukkah, his first year coming off a serious injury, hasn't played a real football game since 2022. And Leighton Cure, his second year coming off the injury. Those are different, right? It's for Hanukkah, he's just coming off the mountain. For Cure, he's kind of rising up in that regard. How does that affect this group for KU? For a group, they want to use a lot of players and ideally would like to have good usage in the passing game too. At the same point in time, if the group isn't ready and doesn't have as good enough depth, maybe it limits what formations KU can or wants to run more often. And maybe we do see more 3 or 4 receiver sets for KU football this season because of that. But that'll kind of be dependent on the personnel, right? And so who's going to emerge? Who is KU going to be forced to play at that kind of Jared Casey role? Who's going to play more of the inline tight ends? Who's going to be the tight end who comes in to be that extra blocker? Is somebody going to be a better blocker than a pass catcher? Those are all going to be questions that kind of remain to be seen. And I think there are a lot of questions for this position group. It might be the one that I'm most scared about. I think I'm most scared about the offensive line. KU has built up trust that they're going to figure that out. And they do have some at least foundational pillars and pieces that they can point to on the offensive line. It's more so just that I have questions of, okay, what happens if this is just an average offensive line for KU as opposed to what we've seen the last 2 years, which is one of the better ones in the conference. With tight end, it's less important of a position as offensive line. So they could end up being below average hypothetically and it doesn't have as big of an impact. So it just depends how you kind of want to look at it. But that can quickly change too, right? If Hanukkah is back to the guy that he was in 2022, if Cure improves another year off the injury, if Groen is at least a serviceable, quality player, dependable guy, and Brune does have that kind of young breakout where he's taking a step forward, this position group should at least be as productive as it was last season, where, Jared Casey was an all Big 12 fullback, but I don't think Jeff Grimes' offense used the tight ends as much, and I think Jalen Daniels wasn't able to throw over the middle of the field as much. Part of that was Grimes. Part of that was I don't think JD had as much confidence throwing over the middle field, which you hope that's back kind of this year. But it'll be very interesting, the usage, I think, above all else, and we'll see if this position group, because that has been one thing. Every season, I think there you could point to with Lance Leipold and his staff, there's been a position group that has I think surprised people. I think back to 2022, and coming into that year was like, oh man, KU lost Kwame Lassiter. Like, I don't know, this receiver core. I don't know if they have enough talent there. And it ends up being pretty solid core that ends up being your starters for the next 3 years, right? You look at the group last year that I guess you could say maybe the defensive tackles were maybe that a bit of a surprise unit for KU. Maybe I don't know where else you would point to, because last year's kind of a different year. But like 2023, I'm trying to think what that would be. I don't know. Maybe it'd be the progression of Jason Bean. Maybe it would be the 2023 tight end core. Maybe I don't know, a lot of different ones that you could point to. But like, it feels like there's always a position group or a big player that surprises, and it wouldn't be surprising if that ended up being the tight end room. So we'll see what they bring to the table, and maybe Carson Brune is the savior that they need. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. One day closer to the start of KU football and their game against Fresno State. We'll have plenty on it, so make sure to subscribe to the show right here on Locked On Jayhawks.